I know that it is one of these men. All I want from you is one code name. Tinker. Tailor. Soldier. Spy.
Hello and welcome back to the Guy Boudreaux Radio Show. If you're joining us for the first time, I'd like to welcome you to the show. Today's special guest is a gentleman by the name of, well, I can't necessarily give you his name, only because he's a former spy who has worked for numerous agencies around the world, has worked with numerous governments around the world. And, you know, this whole big thing with guys like Edward Snowden and what's going on in regards to Syria as far as the exploitation of certain information that will or won't take us into a military posture in regards to the whole, you know, Syrian chemical weapons issue right now is why we decided to do this show. So we hope you're really going to, I mean, again, like everything that we do on the Guy Boudreaux Radio Show, this is something that we really think you're going to enjoy and learn something from. And I don't think it's going to make you paranoid at the end of the day, but it will make you think a little bit in regards to looking to the left or looking to the right and seeing what that individual over there is doing or not doing. Anyways, without further ado, let's bring in my friend. I'd like to welcome you to the show, Jim. And, you know, you and I have known each other for quite some time. And when you agreed to do this, you know, we talked about giving you a fictitious name. So let's go ahead and start with Jim. I like Jim. So welcome to the show, Jim. How's that?
Excellent.
So, Jim, what is your job description when you travel abroad? And let me pause that question for a second. How did you get involved in being a private contractor in regards to, you know, we had certain conversations about the fact that you were involved in taking down, you know, a particular government in the 90s, I believe it was the Philippines.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just not something that.
Yeah. It wasn't the government. It was the executive, you know, the leader. But you go ahead. How did all this happen?
Yeah. How did I mean? What's your background? What's your background?
When I'm quite serious about this. When I was 11 years old, a boyfriend of my mother's owned a dry cleaners. And I had been reading since I was just before 3, played chess like an adult because of my mother's attention, not because I was Mr. Wonderboy, but because she was attentive to all those things. And he said, Ronnie's a very clever boy. Pardon me, Jim's a very clever boy. And do you want me to do that again?
I'll go for it. Yes, do it again.
Okay. Jim's a very clever boy. I have a problem at one of my stores. Could he help me? And she said, well, sure, not knowing what it was. And he said that some employees would be stealing. Would I mind going in and posing as a young boy dropping off his mother's clothing? And then he told me what to do, and I did it. And the idea was that they were not giving receipts to people, but rather keeping the money. And so he sent me into one store and then another and another. And out of 5, 3 of them were doing that. And I would bring everything back to him. And in the beginning, he said, I'll give you $1 when you do it. And I said, no, $20. Now, that was a very long time ago, and $20 was the better part of a week's wage for some men. And his mother just smiled, and he said, well, he is a clever boy. And so I went in, and I did it twice each place, so 6 times, and I received about $120. And as a beginning, it started there, and one thing led to another. And as I got out of the service, I got home, and I found a job doing stunt work, and then I was collecting for a law firm. And one day I got a call to meet these men for lunch. I did in Santa Monica, California. And they asked me to break into the law firm I worked at. Now, I don't know why they knew about me, but they did. They knew quite a bit. And they explained to me that and they were a large draft evasion firm that they needed to recover documents out of there, and they needed it done by someone from the inside, and could I do that? And it was all very James Bondy and all this stuff, so I took the job. It paid really, really well, and I got caught on the third night by the cleaning man, and I thought I had everything all worked out, and he said, "What are you doing?" Getting I didn't have a key, so I had figured out how to pick the lock, and I was getting in, and he said, "What are you doing, son?" And I just stood up and told him the truth. I said, "These people have been doing some things that are very anti-government, and I've been asked to go in and get this stuff." And he says, "Well, you're not very good at it." And I said, "Evidently not." He said, "I'll be here every night at 9 o'clock, and I'll let you in." He let me in for 3 weeks. And when I got done, I gave him $1,000, and which I probably didn't have to do. He was just a right guy. And so after that, I looked like a golden boy. And domestically, I worked for a while, and then one day I got a call to go someplace else, and I did, and it was out of the country. And then the phone didn't stop ringing until about 19 months ago when I came home.
So what would you say your job description is
Consultant
or
is
was?
It says consultant.
Consultant. So are you
Honestly.
are you the guy they bring into a particular country or situation to get things handled so that regardless of the way that it goes, whether it goes to the left or the right, they can wash their hands of it?
No, there's always that's pretty decent estimation of maybe some people. But actually there is a focused end. There is an end in sight, a reason for doing it. And it's not about left or right. It's about whatever is determined. Russia needed a tax base. I'm certainly no tax expert. And they had to go into the streets of Russia and develop it. There were a lot of very bad guys affecting the lives of little honest entrepreneurs. And those bad guys are, we all know who they are worldwide. And they were extorting from them. And so I got attached to a group of guys who were very much like American guys, love their wives and kids, love their country. We're just great guys to be with and work with every day. And they walked me through things and made me look good. And I took 2 or 3 other jobs while I was there that were within that country. And then I came home. And it was always like that. And I really got sick, honestly. I love my wife. My wife's an adorable human being. Nicest woman I ever met in my entire life. I've never deserved a day in her company. And I love to be around her. I love to be around my sons. And I tried several times to do things here on my own. And I was always good at getting it done, but I'm terrible with money. I always made quite a lot of it. But the more I wrote, the more peaceful it was for me. And then I'd get called, and I'd have to go because you have a family to support. I had 4 boys. 3 of them were out of parochial colleges, 1 university, and then 1 out of a state university. They all done well. My oldest was killed, and in an accident. He was a wonderful, just wonderful fellow. So I've been given a really good life, but the one thing I was very good at wasn't something that was applicable to my own country, so I had to work elsewhere, and I did.
So how many times did you go into the field and individuals actually knew why you were there? Or were you a mole? Were you a spy? What was the general consensus for you being there?
Definitely not a mole. The mole has the comfort of the earth around him. No, not a mole. For instance, if you read the law in a given country, read it. A lot of governments around the world developed their rule of law and their political oversight wherewithal from how the United States has done things, lots of them. And then there are a lot of rules that are applicable specifically to that country, whomever they are, which also means that they have had to account for stealing from their own people and making it okay, very much like eminent domain here. You know, if you have something that the oversight folk want, they will eventually get it somehow. And so if you read that law and you have to get something done and you have enough people who find a place within that law, I'm sorry, I'm couching this considerably. One time we needed over 300,000 yes votes on a particular item. Certain people had had their ground removed from them by a despotic leader a generation before. The rules within that particular country were that if you applied to resecure your tribal lands or your family land from the government that it had been taken by, you could make application, and let's say it was 100 hectares, but all you had to have was the GPS. Of course, they didn't have that in that day, but the coordinates on a particular map, and then submit that to the Parliament. If within 31 days you had not heard back, and it wasn't argued out of existence, the land was yours again. Well, there's a particular people in a part of the world that had had over 500,000 hectares taken from them. That's a lot of property. There were probably 75 to 80,000 families, lots of family members, a good deal of adults. And so I put together a team of 30 and we read the law. And we borrowed a couple of aircraft and ran real coordinates. It didn't matter what anybody got because they could all go to what they wanted. And we submitted it in all the capitals of the country at the same time on the same day, hundreds and hundreds of pounds of paper. It all arrived at the Parliament at the same time. They couldn't respond to any of it in 31 days, and we gained the votes that we needed. So there are always ways to fix things, not necessarily illegitimate, just that they're not something that's thought about. And so what was I busy doing? I was busy helping other people try to fix things.
So tell me a little bit about the scariest moments you've ever had abroad working with a client.
I got poisoned in Russia at the Aerostar Hotel in Moscow. And my body weight is always misguessed. I'm considerably thicker and denser. And when the guys came to pick me up in the morning, my head was banged on by the door, and I was about gone. I'd spent about 10 hours like that from the night before after dinner. And they saved my life. I never saw the person again who, as far as I knew, affected that. The young man walked up to me one day when I was taking some pictures with a loaded weapon. His uniform was all rumpled, and there are lots of them, but like that. But he told me that I couldn't be there, and actually, you know, tourists are not something you find there much. And I explained to them I was, and I apologized, and I asked him if the camera made him angry, and he said, yeah. So I took it apart, and then it was film, you know, pocketed the film, palmed it, and he put a couple of rounds in the camera, and I wished him a good day, and he apologized for messing my camera up, and he let me go, and I went home, and a 19-year-old boy got to go to his mom and his dad or whomever that day, and I got to go back and had what I'd come for. There are lots of things, and they happen all the time to a lot of people. And
so did you ever ask yourself, why in the hell am I here at that point in time?
No, I am a misfit. You know, it was early on that I understood that. I had a friend who flew to one country, and this is a guy who circumnavigated the globe. He graduated at Cal Poly years ago. One of the best men I've ever known. Definitely not a spooky guy. Always led a really nice life, born into a charmed family. And he brought a check to me. He asked me to, he's been my friend for 40 years. He brought a check to me, and he said, come home, I've got a project I want to do, and what the heck do you do this for anyway? And the truth of it is, I didn't know the answer. I did say no, and he went back to the States, but it really drug on me. It was like an anchor, because my lovely wife and my kids are home, and I'm out here doing what I was doing. And the truth of it is, the only thing I could come up with is that if you are somehow predilected to a visceral existence, and that the only thing that gets you into that place of tasting life is standing so close to some other edge, I guess that's why you do what you do. And it is less of a strength than it is a weakness of character. And I knew that a long time ago. It's why you can answer that question, the man or the dog.
Tell me a little bit more about let's talk about that man and the dog scenario again for the listening audience. I know you and I had that conversation about 15 minutes prior to this interview.
I was being vetted by some fellows, and it was going to take a couple of days and to go overseas, and there was this little joking opener. And I don't know to this day, was it there? I mean, it really doesn't, it doesn't seem like it was pertinent to what was going on, but no context. I said, who do you shoot, a man or a dog? Before I got the sentence done, I said, the man. And he kind of chuckled. This is a terribly bright young fellow. And he kind of, because it was in Congress, I guess, to what he was looking for. And he said, sir? And I said, you ever met a dog you didn't like? The thing is, I meant it. I didn't mean it from that part of you that speaks to other things in your life, that acquaint yourself with yourself. Would I think taking a life was a great idea? I think it's a horrible idea. But if it's something that has to be done and you've got a choice between the dog or the man and you know neither, I'd probably choose the man.
So what?
And I don't know how to.
So what is your thought? Now that we're on the topic of people dying, and and you're clearly of the personality that would love to obviously right the wrongs and protect the innocent, etc. What do you think what's your opinion on what's going on over in Syria right now with the chemical weapons that killed over 1,400 people, and I want to say 400 of those victims were children, women and children. What's your opinion on that particular government, and how would someone like yourself be able to, or what would the protocol be to go into a government like that and change things? Would you align yourself with obviously you would have to align.
Now,
go ahead.
Forgive me, Guy. Are you trying to format my answer?
No, I'm trying I'm trying not to be. I don't really know what direction I'm going with the question, because ultimately.
Well, let me answer it.
Okay.
Okay. Nations as built as ours, and I mean that as in the building of a community, we have become a very complex community. And where you or myself or a neighborhood might have a moral dilemma with such a thing, the agendas that ride on the back of our government are considerably more sterile in their considerations. There's so very much to consider now. The Kurds were gassed. Other people were gassed. World War I, men were gassed. We became, forgive me, I don't mean this as a, we became aghast at the horror of chemical weapons, beginning with things that were as simple as mustard gas. But nonetheless, it's a terrible thing. The deaths of children, it's a horror show. I'm just one man who has lost a son, and I can tell you, to this day, after all of this time, and it's in my voice right now, to even think of that day is horror. To think of the moms and dads who died alongside of some of those children and their relatives and all that they're going through. That is a horror of moral dilemma sitting in a package. But a nation's choice to get involved and take from its own citizens an allegiance about such a thing, when probably in truth it has none of its own. This is my personal comment.
So let's
I don't know. Just let me finish.
Okay. Yes. Tell me. You can be direct with me. I want in layman's terms. Throw it out there.
You want the man out of the way, kill the man. You want to know who did the gassing? Find out, kill him. But in one country that I've worked in, I'll tell you, there was a woman there, head of pediatric pharmaceuticals. The poor in that country, which make up 90% of its population, make no more than $1, $1.50 a day, and a guy can have a wife and 2 kids. Milk, petrol, and bread cost fundamentally what they do here. How in the world can you take care of a family? And so your daughter gets dysentery or TB or something, she's 5, and you need that medicine that's given freely by people like Libby and Bear, and I mean, they ship in medicines all the time to benefit communities. This woman wanted $5 per child to have them treated. Now, I had a friend of mine say, they ought to just take her out. And I looked at him and said, do you understand that there are 150 who will stand behind her? You're going to kill them too? You have to fix the problem, fix the mindset. And if you want the person out, well, go ahead, but understand there's so many more. There are more despots. There are more horrific fellows and terrible people who will kill children and women and dogs and cats and dads at a drop of a hat. No, I think going into Syria is a silly thing, but it's only silly at a neighborhood level. At a government level, it could be a very wise thing. And because I'm not privy to the reasons of going, which they are probably definitely not the death of the children, I can't tell you what my country should do because I don't know what their information is. There's a reason for difficulty there. We have been a country after Eisenhower that believed the destabilization of governments kept things in flux, not in stasis, because in stasis, strength grows. So what would I do? Right now, I've got no right to make a decision. As a neighborhood guy, I think killing kids is terrible. As a government, it's based on considerably more and isn't something that local people or people giving sound bites out of the news should even be talking about.
Well, it's interesting about the way that you're setting that up, and that is most Americans, and I say this nicely, aren't the sharpest knives in the drawer. Most Americans are defined by the neighborhoods and the culture that they grow up around. And so when they see something that is so unfamiliar with their own thought processes that were born from their zip code, they can't even begin to understand the magnitude of I'll just be straight up honest, and that is there are places in the world, and I think you would agree, where taking a life is like stepping on a bug. Whereas if if I see somebody get hit by a car, my first response is, "Oh my goodness!" And I'm doing everything that I can to get this person to the hospital and to stabilize their vital signs. Whereas if you come from another culture where dying is like taking out the garbage, you have a different mindset out of the gate. And I think that most Americans, we have a false sense of feeling safe. And it's that false sense of feeling safe that I think turns a blind eye to. Look, it's my opinion, and my opinion only, that personally we should go into Syria. Look, if they're going to hand back the chemical weapons, I think that's I would rather that than bloodshed. Hands down. But the reality of it is that you can reside in a country or a zip code long enough to know that the only people or the only individuals you're responsible for is yourself and those around you, that you can somehow through propaganda think that this is the only way of doing things. So not to segue too far into the Syria thing, but I think it's all about the way that humanity articulates its own experiences, or his or her own experiences in the game of life. And that is what we gain empathy for, is based on, that is how we're taught, because it's our own environment that allows us, that gives this empathy, the empathy gauge, if you will, as far as feeling right versus wrong, etc. So that's my, hopefully that was short enough. I don't think it was, but.
No, but I got to tell you, one of the cool things, see, I disagree with you about our population and the populations generally around the world. We have, as have other populations, I'm talking about the regular folk, as you put it, we get dumbed down by what we're fed. And I know a guy, and I like the guy. He's about 50. He's got a good business. He's got a good family. He never watches anything but Hannity and Fox. So what in the world, if your brain is full of that, are you supposed to think? If all you listen to was Oberman, what would you think? And we have not. I always wondered why kids got out of school and nobody taught them how to. And I guess they're doing it now. How to run a family checkbook, how to run a budget, what civil law was about, what the repercussions of crime and stuff were before they got to be 11. I heard a staggering thing the other day that in Germany there's zero unemployment. Now, Mrs. Merkel's done a heck of a job, but it has something to do also with the makeup of the culture of the people. And it's when we get asked questions, and they say, well, like the man on the dog, do we invade Syria? Do we bomb Syria? Do we strike the president like they did Gaddafi? What's an American guy supposed to say? Nah. Well, he's going to say a lot of what he has to say is going to be what he's been fed. And if the feeding is balanced, and every day he might have a balanced reaction to, but what he's not ever going to have is the amazing amount of information that his government does. Our government, probably without reserve, you can say, is the most well-informed at an intelligence level, and mistakes are made all the time, even then, of any country on earth. And so the president and other guys like him, and you've got to know that dozens and dozens of men and women are weighing in on that decision. He's making a decision from some of the most profound informational data available. And that when he says, I think this is a good idea, they may have already figured out that Russia was going to make the move to secure them, and that this was nothing more than profoundly effective sword rattling. And so to guess at it is silly. To argue against it is profoundly ineffective when you've already seen to the electing of your leaders. And one of the cool things that I heard years ago as a boy, I may not agree with him, but he is my president. I may not agree with him, but he's my general, and he just told me to go over there. So if you're going to be a society of civil folk given to the rule of law and given to being a working part of the movement of that body, that community forward, then do as you're asked, and if you can't in good conscience, then be conscientiously observant and don't go. But don't work to defeat it. That's my take on it.
What's to segue a little bit back into what I was saying earlier about
those segues.
Yeah, I sometimes.
Go ahead.
Well, it's interesting to be at a dinner party, and I'm African American, and I'll be at these dinner parties, and I'll be hanging out with individuals that are in their 50s, 60s, and when you ask them, Caucasian individuals, and when you ask them a question about the 60s and the civil rights era and Rosa Parks, they are absolutely clueless. Why are they clueless?
Yeah.
They're clueless because it didn't affect them, because they were only defined by their own, again, zip code and their own set of life experiences that was in this fictitious comfort zone. And so when I say that most of the American people, they need to be able to read, if you're not feeling it, because even before you make an informed, educated decision about anything, you have to have at least some form of life experience telling you to go to the left or go to the right, and have that not based on comfort. And that is my biggest concern in regards to...
Guy, forgive me for butting in. Look what you're asking of our species, who have sought comfort forever. I walked my 6-foot olive brown woman into my little white freckled Irish mother, and my mother wouldn't even acknowledge her. She walked me into her mother and her gorgeous, eloquent 6'4" dad. Her mother wouldn't speak to me, but both men in both families were accepting and kind. Her father walked up to me and took my rather thick white hand in his quite large dark hand and said, "You be good to my girl. She loves you." That was 47 and a half years ago, and of all the children, we are the only ones who are still together with sons that are respectful and loving. And it's a wonder of those gifts. Now, both mothers eventually capitulated, mine before she died, and found that my wife was probably the thing they'd ever met in their lives. And we go through those levels and pay the price for that ignorance.
Let's talk about the spy game.
I don't know if you've ever read Sun Tzu's The Art of War, but there are levels. There's the guy in the field that it doesn't matter if he comes home. He's out there to get something done, and if he can't come home, well, that's just how it goes. The next guy, you'd like for him to come home. Then there's a guy that has to come home. And there's another fellow who doesn't want to come home. And I was the guy who always got to come home. Always. And it's because I was supported so well in what I was doing. And I'll tell you, the last thing I said about my wife is that, not about my wife, but about all of it, and that is that good people, given time, are vindicated because of their general goodness. And I see it all over the world. People make stupid decisions because they're ignorant about things, as they did. My wife is half Syrian, by the way. Her family's community. And she's half Yaqui Indian. And I mean, both unbroken bloodlines until her mom and dad got together. My wife's mother's family is the Christian Orthodox Coptic community in the mountains above Damascus, and it's named after my wife's family.
Tell me this.
Go ahead.
Tell me this, and here goes that segue.
It's okay. It's okay.
How necessary is spying at a national...
It's imperative. It's imperative. Absolutely, period. World War II was only won by spies. If they hadn't been there, we'd all be speaking German.
Interesting.
No, true story, bud.
Interesting. Now go a little. Now, we talked about some of the...
Guy, just a second.
Go
I
for
want to tell you something. Okay, and it won't take long. I'm 6 weeks in Africa. I'm in the Niger Delta. We're down where Mend is. That's the group for the emancipation of the Niger Delta. We're in the jungle. I already met with one of the young rebels, a really fabulous kid, and dead on serious. And there's seven of us, including me. And they made a little pallet for me so I could sleep up off the rock. And I eventually laid down on the rock because it was cooler. It's about 100 degrees and 99% humidity at 1 o'clock in the morning. I couldn't sleep. And malaria, that's what they call it. The mosquitoes that are infected with everything are flying all over the place. And nobody's really sleeping. And it's so black. I mean, you just can't see anything. And I sat up and I said, Emmanuel, can I ask a question? These are all bright guys. Now, these are Igbos. You talk about big folk. These are big guys. And I said, in the little bit of time I've been with you, maybe about 6 weeks, I said, you guys defer to me like I'm a grandfather, which to many of them I could have been. And you're kind and respectful and nothing patronizing. And I don't sense one little hint of racial nuance or anything. And these guys all speak the King's English. Precious Chidabiri, 6'4", 240, has a real PhD, and he's a warrior. And they all started laughing. And I said, what's the joke? And Precious broke in. He said, sir, he said, we need to explain something to you. One of the reasons we don't like the American, this is what they refer to the American Negro as American blacks. We don't like them because they really don't understand the history of being African and then being taken as slaves to your country. And I don't know what's being said, And I said, what do you mean? He said, well, it's our own people that knocked us in the head and took us to the beach. Or some of the Moors, the Arabs. He said, never you guys. You stood off 100 meters and got to buy my grandfather for $20. And it was a hell of a deal. Nobody faults you for making a good deal. And they all laughed. I started laughing. They laughed until they about in tears. They had never, ever had a white man ask them the question. Ever.
Now it was clearly it was clearly a joke.
Oh no! It's a cultural icon. One of the things that I noticed is that wherever I went, and I was in some really bad places. I mean, die-to-day places. And the one thing I never ever saw was aggravation with me. And it had nothing to do with what a special guy I was. But I was never treated as a racial commodity. And I've seen American guys come over there. And I know a couple that wanted me to take them there. And I explained to them, you won't do well. They'll lie to you and they will cheat you and they might even kill you. And that could happen on any day, and it's not an exaggeration. And then I get asked by my American friends, well, why us and not you? And I tell them the story, because it's a story, it's iconic, it's not a joke. And the guys made sure I knew that. Do you know how much time I spent there? 7 years and 4 months. And I'm 7 years and 4 months in. I know the president's coming on the 20th. I know the guy. I've been in his house, eating his food. Good luck, Jonathan. I know him. I've been from there down to the woman begging in the street. I've lived in that hovel. I met the guys who run the Nigerian mafia. I have 3 friends within it, 2 of them very powerful. I got to know everybody. I've got a book here about the consummate patriot, about General Shigaya, who wrote Schwarzkopf's battle plan for Desert Storm. Of the 11 international generals that were brought to El Paso, Texas, he's the guy that Schwarzkopf accepted the battle plan from, which is why we did so well there. I know these people, and what I learned about them is that what I heard, and a bunch of other things, they despise the Chinese. They take everything they can get from them, but they despise them. They'd kill them and cook them and eat them if they could. They hate them to a man. But understanding Africa, understanding Asia, understanding the Russians, understanding is something, and you brought it, the American people don't get to do. And I'm sure that we could probably fix that, by making sure that everybody, maybe 30 countries got together and just said, we're going to exchange every student 1 year in college has to go abroad. You know how to change things here?
Well, that would be interesting. Whether it happens or not, it would be interesting.
Well, it's not going to happen, yeah, and you're right. I'm sorry I segued off. You go ahead. Forgive me.
No. I think it's and to go back to the 3 gentlemen that were sleeping on the rock thinking, they
Six.
a 6. I don't agree with their process. I mean, they expressed something that I thought was more of a joke, and you had expressed that it wasn't a joke, but ultimately,
Yeah, but forgive me, Guy, you don't know that. See, I know it firsthand. You don't know it. If I took you there, and if I told them, Sarah, and by the way, you want to go, I'll take you. I swear to God. I'll take you right into everything, and you'll be safe with me, and it'll all be good. And you'll actually get to know what's real. And not just what I said. There's so much. But unless you're there, I sent my wife to Russia. I worked for a long time, sent her in the worst winter in 50, 60 years, in the middle of the winter by herself, into Moscow, got a room in an academic hotel where a rule is you can't speak anything but Russian. And two friends of mine would come by and get her during the day, and they took her all over everywhere. But she ate Russian food. She had to work the menu out by herself. She was there for 3 weeks. I had her there. She wanted me to take her, and I said, if you go by yourself, you'll come back understanding something I could never show you. She came back changed. And our youngest boy, his dad was my dear friend and was imprisoned in Siberia, in Magadan there. He's my adopted son, and I've had him since he was 12. And he's a precious, precious product of that gene pool. Precious Chidabiri Nwusu is my son. My son. Mother was assassinated. Father died at the funeral. And I was elected as the dad.
wow. What can you say, or can you articulate what happened prior to his parents being assassinated, and how that all came about, and why you were there in the first place?
Well, he was coming over here to go to medical school. His mom is referred to as a kingmaker within the Igbo tribes, and she was very powerful. His father was a bird colonel. Next step is general in the army. And they were an accomplished, not necessarily fabulously well-off, I mean, some wealth, but all earned, because after the Biafran War, and you probably don't know anything about that, but after the Biafran War, when genocide was executed on the Igbos are considered the Jews of Africa. They're one of the few, might be the only African tribe that isn't from Africa. They walked out of the Israeli desert about 1150 years ago into Africa, and didn't stop till they got to the Niger Delta. They're an amazing, amazing people. And she got assassinated. She was shot several times. He was informed and came home to help his father, because they're both civil, that is community, and then tribal burials. And his dad had a heart attack. And in the Igbo tradition, as it is with a number of the tribes, but not all throughout Nigeria, but in this particular area, the eldest male becomes the father of the children of the extended family. That means that for the rest of your life, you are responsible for the education and the raising of 37 children when he was 21. And he's an amazing person. He is a true PhD. He's a member of the African Business Council. He is a member of the African Council on Business in China. I was there for 4 years, 4 times a year for 4 years, and work liaison with him and the folks in Beijing. And he's an amazing kid. And he and my middle son are they're like, they're just like brothers. If you saw them in the dark and didn't know who was what, right? You just hear two guys talking who loved each other, and they're both strong and capable people. So life is hardly about what we don't know. It's always about what we know until we know something else. And I would love to be able, especially you have a very interesting take on a lot of things. And I think it would do you, if I could get you for 60 days and drop you down in Eastern Europe and in the Emirates, in Southeast Asia, China, Africa, it'd make your guys, head swim in the most wonderful way, and would probably be a real rich and solid investment in who you are as a person.
No, I'd love to do that. Absolutely.
I promise to do it, as long as I haven't gone face down on the tomatoes before then.
Okay. Hey, I do have a spy question for you.
Sure.
Now, prior to 9/11, our borders were pretty much wide open.
Yeah.
Theoretically, how many individuals from other countries are here spying on us?
Lots.
Joe the baker,
Oh.
Jim the banker.
Oh, goodness. Oh, everybody. Israel's spying on us, and, we're supposed to be their allies. And the French, the Germans, the Russians for sure, probably the Italians, for God's sakes. We've got so much going on in Spain because of its proximity to some other places. I'll tell you a cute side thing, but it's for real. I've offered up several plans on different things, and I offered up a plan in this one particular country, and everybody eats a pound of rice a day. And the plan was, because there's an awful lot going on there still, you put in a little business as an expatriate where you sell rice cookers. Maybe some. No, I'm serious. And there, you can buy a rice cooker in China, a pretty decent one, for about $3 US, and I'd be a little more now. And so you fill a place up, and nobody makes any money in the place. They're all making about $2 a day or whatever. So it's $1 down and $1 a month. Now they're cooking on gas, and they're boiling water, and they're cleaning pans and stuff. You got a rice cooker. Rice is simple. You can cook it for the family. It's a plug-in. Electricity is free in this place, right? Electricity you don't have to pay for. And so you get to cook your rice, and it only costs you $1 a month, and the rice is the same all the time, and it's really good, and there's no waste. And it's $1 down and $1 a month, right? And it's just like a little Jewish store down in Brooklyn in the 30s, right? And you're just there. And it's about passive intel. It's about listening to the cooks and the service people and who work for every major family in the country. And over a period of 6 months, a year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, depending on the investment of time, right? And you run your business, and of course you got a little bit of backup because at $1 down and $1 a month, you're not going to make a lot of money. You get so much wonderful, visceral, day-to-day information. That's spying. And there's is it The Tailor of Panama? Have you ever seen the film?
No.
Oh, you go rent The Tailor of Panama. You just rent it. Because it will literally, you will call me the minute it's done. You say, oh my God. Because it's based on about 3 true stories. And it will give you a handle that's very interesting. Anyway, spying is necessary in a complex global community to be aware of the surroundings and those that surround you. Look at little Israel, teeny little Israel. And there isn't anybody in the Middle East that doesn't fear that little outfit. Because every man, woman, and child there is standing to defend. Bright, hardworking, innovative, and ordered. And that's a lot. One of the reasons our boys, our soldiers, are such phenomenal tools abroad, and I don't mean that in a mean-spirited way, is because of the level of training, but also because of the measure of their character. Our soldiers are wondrous folk placed in bad positions. A buddy of mine asked me a long time ago, he says, how come you just weren't all messed up? I wasn't a very nice guy when I went, but I know a couple of nice guys who went, and they came back very, very messed up. Because they were thrown into situations that took all that goodness and threw it into a blender and required them to be sociopaths. And they weren't. And it never got put back together. Humpty Dumpty really doesn't get glued back up, and it's a sadness.
Interesting. So what type of training does the typical spy endure or have to go through?
Well, typical guys, I mean, guys that are, that aren't just born with what that fellow referred to as that clever proclivity. They get phenomenal training in all kinds of things. There are a number of old films, one in which James Cagney's in, which are all true. They're films based on things that were really done. Did you ever see the film Enigma?
No.
Okay, well, you need to. The Enigma machine was a complex apparatus that the Germans had. And the story goes, and this is the story part of it, I can't tell you exactly how much of it is true, but probably a good bit of it. And it's not in the Enigma film. It's more about the people in Britain who figured things out, and our guys who actually stole one of the machines. Several were stolen, and they were figured out. But centuries and centuries ago, a rabbi, they had a little kind of Orphan Annie decoder ring thing. And it had a little cam in it and several little wheels with numerals and the alphabet on it, and then a key set. And when they would write notes to one another, they would jumble them, and then the key set would be within a few of the first words of the title or whatever. And so they would just take their little decoder things, and they were able to decode the messages. And in the days of the Inquisition and things, it was really imperative. Well, the Germans got a hold of it through a rabbi that was in a concentration camp. And instead of 3 wheels, they set up sets of 9s in configurations that put the iterations at well over billions of characters.
Interesting.
And their codes became very, very difficult, if not impossible to read. It was our spying that retrieved it and saved us. The same thing happened with the purple code from Japan. If it wasn't for the spying, that code never would have been retrieved. Our guys were reading the Japanese messages as they were written.
Really?
Oh, yes, really. And one of the terrible things is that when you have really accurate data, see, even if a thing is good or bad, if it's accurate, it's good information. So in World War II, the people being in concentration camps and some other very terrible things were known. But if you did anything about it, they'd know that you had the codes. And so a lot of people died because nobody could tell.
No, I absolutely agree with you in regards to spying being a necessary evil, because ultimately, if you go back to this whole Syria scenario, if you see a guy cut a guy's arm off in plain sight of not only the cameras that were there and the video that's now on YouTube, through a propaganda.
He cut his arm off.
Well, no, I'm just kind of giving that as an example.
Okay.
I'm just saying, everybody saw you do it. I mean, your general or one of your leading military individuals has already pretty much given it up. I mean, and that's why he's probably not, in the office next door to you anymore. And so we know what happened, but ultimately people out there can literally look at you in your eyes and not tell the truth. And so the only way to actually get the truth is to organically plant yourself somewhere to be able to extract that and to be able to report what you're getting. And so
that's true.
Yeah. And so that's, I see, look, spying is a necessary evil. The premise of this show is basically to talk about you as an interesting individual. Not everybody has that type of a career, if you will. And it just so happens that we are in a very delicate time in our lives in regards to public relations as it relates to the U.S. and what's going on in the Middle East, without taking sides on either part of the scenario, because even if we start to look at what's going on in Syria, it really doesn't do us any good to deploy missiles from ships if the individuals that are working, they've got the whole Sunni Shiite thing, but if Al-Qaeda is in the Sunni ranks, what's the point? So it's a very...
Let me ask you a question, Guy.
Shoot.
If you and I if you and I are able to put a punitive piece of ordnance, a missile, into the back of a pickup from 4 miles up, why do I need to bomb a community when it's the perpetrators of the horror that I saw in those films that are the guilty parties? Is it that somehow collateral damage, of which there will be some, is necessary to terrorize? Or am I actually after the bad guy? Now, if I have the ability to get the bad guy in his pickup at 60 miles an hour on a dirt road or in a community with very little collateral damage, why would I choose to do other than that if I was actually after the bad men?
Because the bad men work for the regime.
No. Well, what if it is the regime?
No, that's my point. I mean, look, I'm making the assumption that if I am a police officer and I break into your house at night and beat the crap out of you, ultimately, yes, I will be arrested. I will be incarcerated. But also the individuals that I work for, if I'm on duty in that uniform, beating you with a baton, ultimately.
And they're with you?
Pardon me?
And they're privy to it? They're with you?
They are privy. Well, let's put it like this. Maybe that's not the best scenario. I think the better scenario is if I get pulled over by a squad car, and they ask me to step out, and they don't like the answers that I give them to the questions that they are asking me, and now I've got 2 to 3 cops hovering over me, beating the crap out of me. Ultimately, yes, those cops should go to jail, but ultimately,
I agree.
It's because I go all the way back to sensitivity training prior to hiring somebody, which takes me to the name of Edward Snowden. I mean, how did that guy pass a psychiatric test? How did that guy? We missed something.
Well, okay, we don't need to get into this right now with Snowden. I think that there are characters in our history who did everybody a big favor. Remember when I said conscientiously observant? One of the cool things about the Hasidic Jew is that he is completely and utterly, if he is in fact that fellow, observant of what he believes to be true. He just is. A Reformed Jew, not so much. Both Jews, both with fundamentally the same data available to them, but two very different decisions. Mr. Snowden, unlike the other little fellow who dresses up in girls' clothes and did a lot of exposing of other things. So Snowden was about informing as to activity, not at the dereliction of his duty as a citizen. Because as a citizen, I am commended. Now, I'm not arguing for him. I'm arguing about it. As a citizen, we are commended. It's a mandate of our citizenry to come against that which is contrary to our rule of law and what we as a people have developed our confidence in our Constitution and those who lead us. And if you, and I'm talking about Guy, are aware of a travesty taking place at the expense of our population, our community of law, it is incumbent on you to do something about it. Most, as you said before, most don't. Most are not informed enough to do it. Most don't. Now, if you endanger for your own benefit, that's a whole other issue. There are spies, there are people within the community of intelligence and government in our country who have sold out American citizens and American assets overseas for money. Something that stupid, that fragile, that shallow.
But wouldn't you agree, though, that Edward Snowden has put American assets in danger by? I mean, look, he knew the job he was taking on before he took it. And then all of a sudden he woke up one day, he was wearing a Boy Scout uniform. So
I don't know the answer. If things are as I hear them, because I certainly don't know everything about it. I don't agree.
Look, I only hear what I only know what. Look, I only know who he worked for, and it's like anything. If I hire you to do a job, if I hire you to make hot dogs, and you one day
make hot dogs.
No, you decide you want to make pizza. Well, guess what? You knew that you were making hot dogs before I
go
hired
get a job someplace making pizza.
But that doesn't mean that you sell out my hot dog secrets, right? I might be selling the most hot dogs on the block. So
yeah, you're right. You're
I don't
right.
know. I'm not trying to be right or wrong.
No. First of all, I agree with what you just said. Right. Period. I just do. And I don't know what drove the young man. I don't know all that he's released. I don't know who it endangered or what. I don't know anything about it. I just know that our citizenry is expected to be citizens. And citizens have a responsibility. And it is very hard to tell now in this incredibly informed era to know actually what's real, what's true. I believe it was Schrodinger. Yeah, it was Schrodinger. He talked about the symbols that we embrace. And we begin to live by those symbols. And with that being the case, what was it McCain said when this guy from Fox News said, I hate it when they yell, Allah Akbar, and they're bombing. And I hate it, he said. I hate to hear it. And he was really, and McCain said right back, it was like yesterday or the day before or a week ago, he said, do you have any idea what that means? He said, what about a Christian guy who just did something effective in battle and said, oh, God, thank you. Praise you, God. Thank you, God. Without information, we say and do silly things. With enough information, like our government, our president, our leaders have, they make decisions that we probably won't agree with generally, especially when it comes to something that we see as a moral imperative. But invariably, they're much more informed to make a decision that's terribly complex. Anyway, I'm just going on and on. Forgive me.
Oh no, it's all good. I don't want to beat Edward Snowden to death, but not literally. But I'm just saying that what we're talking about. I'm just saying that you make the decision to either work at Nordstrom's or the NSA. And if I work at Nordstrom's, I know that there's a certain protocol in place, whether I like it or not, or I quit. So,
by the way, I do think it's interesting that they missed that particular predilection of character when they vetted Snowden. You would think that would have already been seen through and that he would have been unacceptable.
I agree.
And I agree with you too.
The interesting part about what we've talked about, Jim, or whatever we call you, I mean, we know that you have a former life as a spy, correct?
I have a former life working as a contractor overseas for a lot of different folks, yes.
And the interesting part about that is that you, which is, and I always say this when I talk to you, you are one of the most interesting people I've ever spoken to. So, but, it's not every day that someone that has been doing what you've been doing bottles up those experiences and creates a book or a screenplay from them. And your writing is spot on too. It's not just the fact that you've got great ideas and great experiences, but you're able to articulate those very, very, very well. So, having said that, let's talk about your book called Sisters.
And there have been a few others. It's one of the things was working through my own sanity, and one of the terribles, like when I say it's a sadness, is that the victims generally have no voice. What's referred to by this lady at being interviewed the other day on TV, she said, well, people are just going to die. They were talking about collateral damage. Well, mostly those are the innocent. the little kids who got gassed, the Kurds who were just going to work that day when they got gassed, the people that were just sitting there in the theater in Moscow when the terrorists came in, and the ladies wrapped up in their vests, and how the Spetsnaz boys had to go in and take it down. And so many people died because of misinformation about the gas that was used and a bunch of other things. These are the innocent, and they're the ones that pay the grand bill. And so what I looked for in writing was a vehicle that would give me an opportunity to give those victims voices. When I wrote years ago that Columbia did, it was about giving a victim that back in the late 40s had no voice. Just a young girl that got raped and in a terrible roll of events was murdered. Certainly wasn't premeditated, but it did happen. She was just buried, no voice, until decades later when somebody heard the story and got to write about it. Those victims, young children who are molested, ladies who are killed, men who are robbed and beaten to death. We just had a dear old World War II soldier here in our town, 89 years old. 2 young men beat him to death in the parking lot while he was waiting for a friend to come get him. And all that time, defending his country, well thought of in the community, thought of as kind of a walk-around grandfather, referred to as Shorty, was a little guy. They beat him to death with flashlights. The victims very seldom have a voice. And so I wanted, when I wrote Sisters of Vigilance, I was able to create a contemporary fantasy vehicle that gave voices to victims. The other thing is that almost every crime in the story, in the book, in the film, they're real crimes against children and real people in different positions and different names that perpetrated those crimes. And demonstrating that it goes back a long time. I believe we go back to the 14th century and then bring it up to speed here, because it's happened forever. When the Crusaders went into the Muslim communities and slaughtered every man, woman, and child and ate the dogs, and then the Muslims came in and slaughtered all the men and women and the kids in the other communities. The victims have paid prices and have never had voices. So that's what I write about. And it appears to be entertaining. A lot of people seem to like it, and that's really good for me. But the best thing for me is being able to write it, because it cleans out a part of me. And for me, that's a good thing.
Now, how do I get this? I want to make sure I get this right with you. I know we've been talking about the spy stuff and calling you Jim, and then now we're talking about your book, which is on Amazon.
Well, you know what it says.
We're not being very good spies right now.
Well, it's okay.
I want to do you a huge solid by talking about Sisters, but also talking about the other things that make up the very fabric of a day-to-day existence in the U.S. or anywhere abroad, and that is the stuff we can't see. Hence why the spying thing is so cool. It sounds cool, and I appreciate your time. Let's definitely not be strangers. I always enjoy talking to you.
You ever want to do it again, just give me a holler. It's so nice to hear your voice, Guy.
Once again, I'd like to thank our listeners for tuning into the Guy Boudreaux Radio Show. This is Anything and Everything. Please stop by our Facebook page and like us, and shoot us a tweet at the Guy Boudreaux Radio Show. We'd love to hear from you. Have a blessed week. We hope you enjoyed the show, and we hope you come back next week. And by the way, if you've missed any shows, you can always look us up on iTunes, and you can also do a search on Stitcher Radio for any past shows that you may have missed. So again, I'm Guy Boudreaux. Have a blessed week. Till next time.
Judgment Gate. Hello, you listen? How long must we wait? I wanna know. Sit down, your set by your almighty hand. Hey, Lord, you be listening. How long must we wait? Send down your low rider. Open up the judgment gate. They come with lies and double dealing. Pay no attention to your name. It's their own souls that they're stealing to the everlasting shame. Hear me crying out. Hey Lord, you be listening. Are you listening? How long must we wait? How long? Send down your low rider. Open up the judgment gate. I'm about to tell Hey Lord, you be listening. How long must we wait? Send down your low rider. Open up the judgment gate. Hey Lord, you be listening. How long must we wait? Send down your low rider. Open up the judgment gate. Hey Lord, you be listening. How long must we wait? Send down your low rider. Open up the judgment gate. I wanna see them who's a spark. You better get your house in order. And I wanna hear them arrange a crack. And better get ready and don't be late. And I wanna hear the sound of the low rider rolling through the judgment gate. Hey, hey, hey. Hey Lord, you be listening. How long must we wait? Send down your low rider. Open up the judgment gate. Hey Lord, you be listening. Get your house in order. How long must we wait? Get ready and don't be late. Send down your low rider. Open up the judgment gate.